dealing with the Rav Adabar Ava, who was this rabbi who allowed people who were accompanying him not to have to worry about falling buildings and falling walls. He had this tremendous zechus, and apparently we already saw in one story that he wasn't even aware about like how people were schlepping him along and what was happening. And as we're going to see now, as the Gemara discusses what was the source of his merit, it was about his complete involvement in Torah. It sort of explains his being a little bit oblivious. So let's take a look. It says like this: "Mai havi uvdi de Rav Adabar Ava ki had the itmar." So the line starts with the word itmar. It's about 20 lines from the bottom, right near an asterisk, about 5 lines above, where there's an asterisk and a half a parentheses. Okay, the itmar was said. Shalu Talmidav, his students asked him, the Rav Adabar Ava, "B'mai harachta Yomi? In what merit did you have? Did you live to such an old age?" Amar lahem, he said to them. So as opposed to before, it was about that he saved people from falling buildings. Here, it's to the question of old age. What did you merit? What did you do to merit such a long life? Amar lahem, he said to them, in my entire life, I never got like upset about things in my house, which presumably means, about to my wife or kids, but often has a context of wife, but could mean anybody, any of the members of the house. I never took a step in front of somebody that was greater than me. Below here, I did not think Torah in the filthy alleyways. Below, a place inappropriate to be thinking Torah, like not thinking Torah in a toilet and in a bathroom. Below halachti arba amot below Torah below tefillin, but I never went for amot without Torah and without tefillin. Maybe with the exception of when he went through those alleyways. Okay. Anyway, but I was always wrapped up physically and literally, literally and metaphorically in Torah. I was always, and in tefillin, because tefillin obviously represents Torah. So I was always wearing Torah. I was always with Torah and tefillin. I never, went to sleep in the Beis Medrash. Not temporary, and not a long sleep. Let's see what's happening here. Excuse me a second. I don't know what's going on here. I'm sorry, just 1 second. This thing is... what's going on here? All right, anyway... Anyway, okay. And so I never slept, meaning so I was always both respected the space of the Beis Medrash and also always involved in my Torah. I was never rejoiced in the stumbling of my friend. There's a German word for that, right? What's the word? Schadenfreude, right. So anyway, okay. V'lo karati l'chavirai b'hakinato v'amile b'chaninato. And I never called my friend in some type of a nickname, 2 versions of a nickname. Some say it means a nickname he gave himself and a nickname other people gave him, or some people say it means a nickname other people gave him, and chaninacho might mean a family name, a last name, that even though it was his name, it's not like a show of respect. You say, hey, Linzer. So actually there's an interesting Tosus on this. If you look at Tosus, Bachinato, he says, so one is a nickname, but a nickname that's used as somewhat in a derogatory sense raises an interesting question, right? It might not be derogatory, but it might not be fully respectful. Is there an idea of not using it even if it's a non-derogatory nickname? And then the second one also says, perish kinoi shem mishpachto. Shem Levi, Kamo Shem Chanichat Avot Begitin Arasar Darok. Go and Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra. So he wants to pick an example of a last name. So what's the last name? Like the Ibn Ezra. Shekol B'nei Mishpachto Hayuni Kraim Kach. It wasn't that his father's name was Ezra. Everybody in his family was Ibn Ezra. So it's a last name. V'davka Lignai, and that's only if it's done in a derogatory way. Like, say, hey, Ibn Ezra. So I don't know, it depends on who the person is, whether that's considered a proper form of respect or whether that's like a disrespectful form of respect. respect. If that's a respectful way, like we say, the Ibn Ezra says, that's a respectful way. Anyway, it's fascinating that he gives that as an example. But the idea of family names was, I don't know the history of that, but it's like it was not so prevalent in the time of Tosfos. He needed to give an illustration, using like the Ibn Ezra as an illustration. Also fascinating the fact that he uses a Sephardi, Parshan, which is both not in Tosfos' normal realm in two ways. He's Sephardi and he's one of them at Farshei HaMikra, not somebody who really is involved in Gemara. So fascinating. All right, so now the Gemara continues. Where are we? Okay, so those things. Okay, so anyway, not exactly clear to me. It's a laundry list of things. What the sort of common denominator of all those things are. Obviously, some of the things are. There's overall an issue of respect, of not like, and maybe in some ways it's a little bit again of a critique of the earlier story, which is also self-critique about the rabbi that learned so much Torah that he was so haughty. Here's a person that's constantly learning Torah, constantly involved in Torah, but also, he knows his place. He doesn't take even one step in front of somebody that is greater than him. He doesn't get upset at other people. He doesn't take upon himself the sense of entitlement to call other people by nicknames. He gives everybody their full respect. So I think it's a nice balance of the immersion in Torah together with a sense of humility and respect and treating people with respect. So in that way, at least, it's a little bit of a contrast to the earlier story. But other than that, it's hard to exactly know what to do with this long list of things. Yes?
Ibn Ezra is a contemporary of Bali Tosafot.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now the Gemara continues. Okay. Amalei Rafram Bar Papa. Tell us some of the. So Rav said to Rafram Bar Papa, tell us some of the great things that Rav Huna used to do. Since we're talking about great things here, that who was it here did that Rav Ada Bar Ava. So now we're going to do another types of lists of great deeds of rabbis. Amalei Biankusei Lo Dechirna. I don't remember things he did in his youth. But Sivusei in his older age, Dechirna, I remember. Every day that it was cloudy, they brought him out in a gold, throne, or not throne, but like some type of a thing, like a seat that you carry, you carry somebody on. So first of all, that's like already you start, your eyebrows are going up, like gold, a gold throne that they're bringing out, a gold seat, it sounds a little haughty, but let's see what he would do. He would go ahead and he would inspect the entire city. Every wall that was shaky, going back to the theme of shaky walls, he would demolish it. Because it would be a danger to the people. If the owners had the means, then the owners would have to rebuild it on their own, because their wall was representing a threat to people, and it was their responsibility. The low efshar, and if they didn't have the means, so Bani Le'iu Mididei, he would rebuild it on with his own funds. Every Erev Shabbos, he would send a messenger to the shuk, to the marketplace, and any vegetables, any food that would be left over, late Friday afternoon, that would obviously get thrown out because they couldn't be refrigerated, he would buy them up. And he would throw them into the river. He had no use for them, but he would buy them up. And we'll see the reason he would buy them up is in order to encourage the sellers to bring all of their to bring their full stocks to the marketplace, so people would have enough and they would have a full range of options, and they shouldn't, because they shouldn't worry that it'll all go to waste.
Agricultural price supports.
There you go. Okay, although that's in terms of growing the food. Here it's in terms of encouraging it to be sort of to be brought to the market. But okay. The lace filaniyim, so the Gemara says, 1 minute. This is a question that comes up nowadays, right? The stuff that restaurants throw out. Why don't you just give it to the poor? Why are you throwing it out? So the Gemara says, no. Zimnin de samcha datayu v'lo asu lemizbin. No, because then what will happen is that people will assume, oh, he's going to, why do we have to buy food for Shabbos? Who is this again? Rav Huna, right? Rav Huna will just buy it all up and give it to us. So therefore, and they won't buy. Now, why would that be a bad thing? So fine, so let him do that. So Rashi here says, what does Rashi say? שנסמכים על ניסים לא סייג, אומרים אין לנו צריכים לקנוס, ושמא לא ישתייר שם כלום, ואין להם הלכה בשבס. That if they wait till the end and he buys up only the stuff at the end, then maybe there won't be anything left over, and then they won't have and they won't have any food for Shabbos. So he didn't want to have them overly rely on that. Okay, 1 minute. Where are we? Okay, so fine, but at least give it to animals. No, you don't feed human food to animals, which is quite funny because presumably the reason is you don't want to waste the food, but here it's going to waste anyway. Somehow it's seen as more disrespectful to the food to feed it to animals. Maybe it more is seeming like dehumanizing to people that you feed human food to animals, and is that somehow seen as more of a problem than just throwing it out? Yes.
We're supposed to feed treif meat to dogs.
Yeah, okay, but that's a question about what your purview of human consumption is. If you're talking about, we, the people who would eat it, if your sense of community is the Jewish people, so I think but the Torah also says that you sell it like so anyway, there are different, Dafka, the Psukim in the Torah also mentioned giving it to the non-Jews in that case. Anyway, okay. Below Lizvine Klal, so why is he bothering to buy it? No, Nimsas Machshilan lost Lavo. Then he's going to cause them, the sellers, to stumble, because then they will, they'll, not stumble, but it'll be hurtful to the economy, to the people, because then they won't bring all of their food to the market. So it's quite an interesting story. On the one hand, he's going out with his gold chair, which, which represents a little ostentatiousness of his wealth. You wonder what that's about. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, maybe here's somebody that, does have this sort of sense of kavod of himself, but at the same time, he's very much concerned about the community well-being. And again, maybe I'm over-reading into all of these stories, but here you have these stories about great people, and to me it seems that it's all somewhat in the background of the Choni stories. So Choni, on the one hand, didn't go out in any gold chair. They had to go find out Choni. He was, who knows where he was, but Choni wasn't also concerned about public welfare. Right? He wasn't the one that was concerned that nobody was getting rain. Here's somebody that is very proactively, on the one hand, taking a certain amount of kavod to himself. It's sort of like, I feel wonderful, take all the kavod you want, just as long as you're serving the community and you're helping us out, if it's important for you to get that kavod, gesund to hate. So that, I think, is an interesting contrast, that he's dafka is taking the kavod, but on the other hand, the type of of proactive and out of his own funds and his own efforts, taking in the communal concerns. What to exactly do with the fact that it's better to throw it out than to give it to animals or to give it to the poor, raises, I think, interesting questions. Okay.
Miracle workers.
And they're not miracle workers, right? They're doing it all in very practical ways.
Allure,
right.
Such a...
Exactly. I think it's consistently setting up counter Choni models. And it's exactly that, right? And they're working very much in a very real world type of a way.
Choni Ben Yehuda, it says they deliberately went in the gold chair because he went into the non-Jewish neighborhoods and he gave them street creds. He was credible because he was such a wealthy man. He was doing good things. They would follow his lead in the whole community.
Okay, that's a nice explanation. All right, and on that note, okay. Kihavi le milsa de asusa. Okay, now when he would have some type of a remedy, some type of a for a disease, some type of a medicine, have a malikuza demaya or have a malikuza, he would fill up some type of a container, and he would hang it like at outside of his house. The amar called the anybody who needs this medicine can come and take. The army, and that A would provide it for the community, and B would allow people, privacy. You wouldn't have to announce the fact that you were sick or that you needed the medicine or go even to him directly. You could go ahead and just take it on your own when nobody was looking. The Igad army, and some say Milsa de Shivsa, having Gamir. He knew the matters relating to Shivsa, which was a certain like a shade. Which was, the Gemara says, happens when you don't wash your hands. This evil spirit comes into you. And he would feel. So here was more about just again talking about public well-being, trying to address issues of public health. So he would fill up a vessel of water, v'dolile, and like fill it up. V'amar kol detzarech leisi v'leil. Anybody who needs should come and doesn't have running water and needs water should come and wash their hands with this. The lowly stocking that they should not be endangered. So here, in a way, it's very nice. It's sort of like the previous thing. It's it's something like he's concerned about public health issues and trying to do things. So we had price supports or whatever. We had supports of merchants, and here we have public health. Yavikarich rifta. When he would eat bread, literally wrap bread, but it means when he would break bread, when he would eat, havipatach levave. He would open up his heart. The amar kolman ditzarich leisi v'leicho, like a Pesach, right? Like the Seder. Anybody who needs should come and eat. Amar Rava. So Rava said, where were they? Kulu matzina mekaime. I can do all of this. I could live up to all of his examples. I wonder if Rava had the money to live up to it, but presumably he felt he could. Libar meha, except for that last one, that just opening up your doors to everyone. The lo matzina lemevet, that I can't do. Why? Mishum de nefishi b'nei chayla, because there's too many de mechuza. Either there are too many troops in mechuza, or just have the phrase b'nei mechuza. There are too many people in mechuza, and I could not open up my doors to everyone. I think I read the word wrong there. It wasn't livave, it's libave, to his doors. He would open up his gates, like bava. I'm sorry about that. He would open up his doors anyway and call anybody who wants. So anyway, Rabbi says I could do any of that except for the last one. That's just I'd be overrun.
This is still Rav Adabarava?
Yeah. I mean the Rav Huna. Rav Huna. Yeah, Rav Huna. Right, Rav Huna. Okay. Top of Chafaf Hamad Aleph. Ilfa Reb Yochanan, very famous story now. Okay, so that was about, again, people that of great merit, and also particularly also about their the one case was just learning Torah and respecting people. The other case was which might have been in contrast to the whole story about the person who said how ugly you are and his haughtiness. But this last story was great people in terms of what they do for the community. Let's take a look now at this story. Ilfa Reb Yochanan, on a slightly different theme. Ilfa and Reb Yochanan have a Garsi Bil Raisa. They were learning Torah. The Chigalahu Milsa, but they were having a really hard time financially. Tuva, exceedingly so. Amri, and they said, Nekum b'neizel v'navid iska. You know what? Maybe we need to take to set aside the learning and go into business. We have to start earning some money. V'nekayim b'nafshan, and we should fulfill in ourselves the verse. Efes ki lo yeh b'chayev yom. There should be no poor among you. So lo yeh b'cha. You yourself shouldn't be poor. You have a responsibility to make sure that you're not poor. So you have a responsibility to support yourself. Azlu, osve to seguda. So they went and they were going wherever they, left the base medrash, were on their journey to start seeking out a parnasa, and they were sitting underneath a bridge. Ru'iyah, again, a shaky bridge. Again, notice the theme of shaky walls, shaky buildings. Like he knocked down shaky walls, they're underneath a shaky bridge. And again, what we've heard before about the shaky wall was that they wouldn't, whoever it was, Rav and Shmuel, I think it was it Rav and Shmuel, wouldn't walk by the shaky wall. They were afraid it would fall, but they had Rav Adabarava there, or I keep forgetting who we're talking about. Rav Adabarava, his merit prevented the wall from falling. So that's like the background here. They're under a shaky bridge. We already know what could happen if you're under a shaky wall, shaky bridge, if you don't have sufficient merit. Okay, so they were under this shaky bridge. They were breaking bread, eating bread. Also, two heavenly angels came. And Reb Yochanan overheard the heavenly angels talking to one another. And one said to the other, let's cast this bridge on them. And let's kill them. Why? Because they've abandoned eternal life, they've abandoned the learning of Torah, and they're involving themselves in this worldly life, in making money. So they did such a terrible thing. Let's cast the bridge on them. So Amar Le'idach, the other one said back, Shavkinu, no, leave them alone. To Ikabucha, there's one of those two, to Kaimi Le'shata, that literally the time is standing for him, meaning that he's going to be very, that he's going to raise to great heights. So, and he doesn't deserve to die. So Rabbi Yochanan Shaman, Rabbi Yochanan heard this conversation. Ilfa lo Shaman, Ilfa didn't hear the conversation. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan Ilfa, Rabbi Yochanan said to Ilfa, who he wasn't aware whether Ilfa had heard or not. Shama Mar Midi, did you hear anything? Amalei, well, no. So rather than saying, so I must be hearing things and going crazy, he said, no, he said, Amar, Midashami Anna, that I heard this, Ilfa lo shama, and Ilfa didn't hear it, Shmami na, Lididi kaimali shaita. So obviously they must be talking about me, because I'm at a level that I was able to hear this. So it must be that my time has come in terms of like the world of Torah. So Rabbi Yochanan said to him, Ehader, I'm going to go back to the base medrash. V'uki b'nafshai, and I'll fulfill in my verse. Rather the verse, make sure you're not poor. I'm going to fulfill by myself the verse. Ki lo yechtal evyon mikev haaretz. There's never not going to be poor. So I'll be one of the poor. So okay, there's got to be poor. Let it be me. I'm going to go back and learn Torah. Rabbi Yochanan Hadar. Rabbi Yochanan went back. Ilfa lo Hadar. Ilfa didn't go back. Ad asa Ilfa, until Ilfa returned, from his going out into the wide world and making his fortune. So we could be talking about many years later. But in the interim, Malich Rabbi Yochanan had literally become king, but it means Rabbi Yochanan had been appointed as the Rosh Yeshiva. And as Rashi points out, that does not just mean a position of status, but also presumably he was given significant, whatever. He was given funds, wealth, in order to, give status to his position. If you look at Rashi, the third line, narrow line, Malach Reb Yochanan minuhu Rosh Yeshiva leyan minakhu mishaya Rosh Yeshiva hayu megadlin oso mishalahen umashirin oso. If the person was not independently wealthy, they would help, give him money in order to make him wealthy. So I'm not sure if that's all so clear in the psukim that it means like, oh, not only did he get to be a Rosh Yeshiva, he also got to be, to have his issues of poverty addressed. But nevertheless, there is that sense that that the poverty issue is no longer a concern of his. What? They gave him a desk, exactly, and an office. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Okay, Amulo, Iasiv Mar Vigaris Lo Havi Malich Mar. So they said to what's his name? They said to Ilfa, if the master, meaning if you Ilfa had stayed in the base medrash and learned, then the other master, Rabbi Yochanan, wouldn't have been the Rosh Yeshiva. You would have been the Rosh Yeshiva. You were smarter than Rabbi Yochanan. You knew more than Rabbi Yochanan. If you had just stayed in the base medrash, it would have been you, not him. Must have made him feel really good. So what did he do?
His name is Ilfa, which means learn.
Exactly. So Azil Talia Nafshe Be'askaria Desfinta. So he went and he suspended himself from the mast of the boat. The mast is the big pole in the middle. That's the mast, right? Okay, from the mast of the boat. Amar, he said, I'm going to show you how much I know. If anybody will ask me anything, of any of the brisos of Reb Chia and Rav Oshia, they were the ones who who edited the Britot and of the Tosefta, and I cannot prove to you that that's already anchored, rooted in a Mishnah. So then, I'll cast myself from the mast of the boat and I'll drown myself. Okay, it's a little dramatic, exactly. But anyway, I'm going to prove how masterful is my knowledge. Not only do I know the Mishnah and the Brisos, I'll be able to show you how they're all connected. Okay, also Husafa. So somebody took him up on his, on his offer, on his challenge. Tanalei and taught him the following brisa. Somebody basically is about to pass away, and he's leaving, what do you call it? A fund. Yeah, but what do you call it when you set aside? Not just a fund, a trust, right? The trust for his kids. So he says, "Here's the money, and what I want you to do is provide for my children 1 shekel each week out of this trust." The only thing is that there's so many kids, and just to provide, reasonably for their needs, they deserve a selah, more than a shekel. So what do? No simlam selah. You can give them what they need. Now, why? Why isn't that violating what he said? Well, one way of understanding that is because, it's the principle of yesh b'chla masayim maneh. If he said give them 100, he didn't say give them only 100. So give them 200. 200 is also 100. So then you're allowed to do. But if he said al titnu lam elo shekel, only give them 100. Don't give them more than that. Ein nosem lam elo shekel. Then you can only give them a shekel. You can't give them more. Now if he said give them 100, not only 100, give them 100 a week, but then he also added to that. Mesu Yershu Achim Tachtehem. If they die, then some other people, not their children, should be the next, inheritors of the fund. Should be the next beneficiaries of the fund if they die. So in that case, all the money isn't coming to the kids, right? Because it's not that it then passes on to the kids' kids. It goes to some other party. So in that case, Bein Sha'amar Tenu, Bein Sha'amar Al Tinu, whether he says give them a shekel, give them 100, or don't give them more than 100, in either case, Ein Nosim Lem El Shekel. You don't give them more than 100 because clearly this money is not all going to them. It's whatever's left over is going to someone else. So therefore, you don't have the same degree of latitude of interpreting. Well, he said 100. He didn't say no more than 100. We'll give them 2. No, you assume that he meant precisely in that case because he's intending that other people will ultimately be the beneficiaries. It's not like all the money is eventually going to go to them anyway. So that's a Breita. Very interesting. How is it tied into a Mishnah? So Amar Le, he said to him, Hamani Rabbi Meir, the Amar Mitzvah L'Chaim Divrei HaMeis. This is Rabbi Meir who says it's a mitzvah to do what the Meis says. So this Breita is working out what exactly are the parameters of interpreting what it was that he said. When he says 100, does he mean exactly 100? Does he mean no less than 100? Does it depend on other things he said, how we interpret that word? But all of that is figuring out how to interpret within a context and within what the other types of needs are, what it is that he said. But assumes as a basis that you have to do what the Meis commanded. And there's it's not like he gave this over as a matana. This is actually, he gave this over as a tzivoy. He said, this is my deathbed wish, that I want you to distribute the funds this way, right? So that's a principle. I mean, when we get to Baba Basra, we'll learn there are 2 ways in which somebody can distribute their funds other than allow natural inheritance to take place. One is a deathbed bequest, which actually is like a will. And the other is that you're not actually transferring the ownership of it, but you're giving a tzivoy. You're saying, here's how I want you to treat the funds, but it's not an actual transfer of the funds. And that's this issue of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis. So he said this is all based on a position we have in a Mishnah of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis, and this is a Breita just working out the parameters of how to interpret what it is that he's actually saying and how that actually should be interpreted in the particular context. All right, so that did not seem so. I mean, it's interesting, because it's not like the exact point is in the Mishnah, right? This is obviously much more of a working out of a very general principle in the Mishnah. But he's saying, nevertheless, I have all of the information of all the Breitos. Not only do I know it, but I have it organized so I can sort of locate it in the various Mishnayot and tell you the Breitos here are working out the implications of this Mishnah. This Breita is working out the implication of that Mishnah. And the point, I think, being that not only did he have mastery of the material, but he had it all sort of very, well organized and associated with one another. So that shows, his mastery of Torah. Of course, it's not exactly an analytic ability, okay, but it's also not the other extreme, which is just like, the Gemara sometimes talks about Sinai, like somebody who just knows all the information, but sometimes there's like a derogatory phrase of like, he's like a chamor no say svarim. He's like a donkey laden with books. Like, okay, he just knows a lot of information. So on the one hand, you don't see demonstrated here tremendous analytic ability, but what you do see is, the mastery, like what he's demonstrating is the mastery of all of the knowledge, but in a way that's organized and linked and makes sense and categorized and so on. Yes.
Is this accurate? It's interesting, it seems to me, that he doesn't refer to these teachings as Breitot or as Tosefta. It's their Mishnah and our Mishnah.
Yeah, but I think
the Mishnah of Rabbi Shaya,
right,
as opposed to Matnitin, our Mishnah.
You're right. That is right.
So
I translated it as Breita, but you're right. That is the way it is phrased. Like their Mishnah, our Mishnah, and Masnisin is always our Mishnah. That is correct. But
so it sounds like there was
sort
of a level playing field.
Yeah, but I don't think so. I think that the very statement, there's always that assumption, like our, means the canonical, the authoritative one. You're right, that is the phrase, but the fact that he's linking it in our Mishnah, if anything, could be shown to be doing the opposite point, basically saying that all of this, our Mishnah is authoritative, is canonical, everything else sort of is a commentary on it, or is a derivation of it. But yeah, I don't think anywhere in the Gemara do you get a sense that Breita and Mishnah are on an equal playing field. Yeah, go ahead.
What's supposed to be the moral of the story?
Right.
To kind of evolve into a random.
Right, exactly. The only common thing is the bridge and the shaky bridge or whatever.
Well, the context, maybe a lot of these stories have to do with miracle workers or Tamim or whatever, who, like Rafuna, he didn't just say the base medrash. he was involved with the community.
Right.
Tony Amagel, he obviously was. Maybe Ilfa is kind of saying, well, it would be very nice to be a Rosh Hashiva, but the businessman can also be.
It's interesting because I was reading this. It's that like Ilfa's making a spectacle of himself. It's not like what he does is so amazing. And even if he did amazing, it's like okay, but now instead of being a Rosh Hashiva, you're a guy, on a mast of a boat. So if anything, I sort of saw this in the opposite way, which was like we're talking about the power of going out and taking care of the needs of the community. But Ilfa's just going and taking care of his own, now it's not like he wanted to be rich necessarily. He didn't want to be poor, but I think the point of this is to exactly sort of speak about the choosing between like a life of Torah, and a life of, of business or of making money. And it's really coming to sort of, the critique is on, it seems to be clearly that it's on, it's on Ilfa.
That's the last word.
Yeah, but in a way that's like, that was nice. Whatever, that was nice. Rabbi Yochanan is Rosh Hashiva. He's there on the mast doing some meaning. That's the way I see it. And that we've been talking about the importance of using your funds and taking care of the needs of the community, but that doesn't, but there's also, but that shouldn't be led to say, so I'll just go into business and not learn Torah. And that's the way I read it, yes.
So just to drill down this a little further to that, the question that is asked is a question that goes back to the prologue of our story. Because we've got these two yeshiva buffers,
right,
who are poor, they can't make a living.
Right.
And now the story is about heirs who can't survive.
That's nice.
Description of what's happening here. And maybe that story is supposed to be some reference to who was Rabbi Yochanan, who goes back to the yeshiva and is actually getting taken care of, as you pointed out before. But it seems like they're going above and beyond providing. Maybe the question really to Ilfa was supposed to be about the use of the endowment beyond minimal support. And Ilfa doesn't get it. He answers off. I'm not sure exactly where to go with it, because
that's a very nice point. That like a limited amount of funds, and what do? Do you try to sort of stretch the funds, which is the first case of the Breita? You read the words in a way to type stretch the funds, or do you accept sort of the Divrei Hamet and you limit yourself to the funds and you figure out how to make do? It's sort of like that means like Yeshua Cherem Tachteya means so other people will get the money. That's what Yochanan said. I'll be poor, other people will get the money, it'll all work out in the end, but I'm not going to try to stretch the funds. I'll stay within those realities and work with it. That's a brilliant idea. That's very nice. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. So where were we? Gamzu. So now we get to some Nachum Ish Gamzu stories. We can try to figure out how it's connected, but let's take a look. They said about Nachum Ish Gamzu, Shayasuma Mishteinav was blind in his two eyes. Gida Mishteyadav, he was had I don't know what the word for it is, but he didn't have either of his arms. Kita Mishtei Raglav, he didn't have his two legs; they were both cut off. V'chol Gufo Malei Shchin, his whole torso was filled with blisters, and sores. Vayamuto B'veis Ra'ua, that's the one obvious link. He was in the shaky house. We had a shaky wall, a shaky bridge, a shaky house. And the legs of the bed were in buckets of water, so that like weasels should not climb the bed, because he didn't have any arms or limbs to push them off. So the buckets of water, what? Ants. I'm sorry, right? Ants, so that he didn't have any limbs to push them off. We're back to the shaky house. So his bed was in a shaky house. They wanted to get his bed out so the house wouldn't fall down on him, like the previous story, right? When he wanted to get the wine out, out of the shaky house. So and then to worry about getting out all of the other vessels. Amar Lahem, he said to them, Benai, Penuet HaKeli V'achar Penuet Mitati. First take out the vessels and then take me out. Shemuftach Lachem, Kozman, because you can be confident, Kozman Sh'ani B'vayis, as long as I'm at the house, Ein Abayis no fell. It would not fall down. So Mamish, this is the real parallel to the previous story with Rabbi Bar Ava. His Torah protected him and he wasn't even aware. Here, Nachum Ish Gamzu is quite aware that he is being protected. Of course, the irony is that the house isn't falling down, but look at what terrible things has already happened to him. So we're going to look at that. But anyway, so what did they do? So fine, they followed his instruction. First they took out the vessels, then they took him out, then the house fell down. Mamish, a parallel to the earlier story. Okay, Amrulo Tomidav, so his student said to him, so that at least presumably is the reason this is being brought in, about shaky houses. But now that we're talking about him, Amrulo Tomidav, his student said to him, Rabbi, since you're so righteous that you protected the house from falling down, so Lama how could these terrible things happen to you about what has happened to your body? Amalem Banai, he said, my children, I brought it upon myself. Once I was going on the way to my father-in-law's house, and I was carrying with me a load of 3 donkeys. Echad shel ma'achal, one of food, ve'echad shel mishteh, one of drink, ve'echad shel minei megadim, and the other of all types of delicacies. So, ba'ani echad, a poor person came. So to me, this is evoking that earlier story, right? With who was it? With who said like, he was coming from the base medrash, and he was traveling on the river, and he said mechua, and the person came who was ugly and disgusting. So here he was. Anyway, it also a little bit evokes Eliezer, going to the future Eved Avram, the future father-in-law's house, laden down with all these good things. Anyway, so a certain poor person came to me. The Amad li b'derech, the Amad li Rebbe Parnasein. He said to me, my master, support me, feed me. Amarti lo, I said to him, Hamtin eksher fruk min hachamor. Give me a second so I can unladen it from the donkey. I have these bundles of food. Let me untie some of the bundles and give you the food. So lo hispakti li fruk min hachamor. I did not have a chance to undo it from the donkey. Undo the burden from the donkey. Achi yatzta nishmato. He died from hunger. Halachti v'nafalti apanav. I went and I fell on his face. V'amarti, and I said, Einai shelo chasu aleinecha. My eyes that did not have compassion on your eyes, yasumu, should be made blind. Yadai shelo chasu ayadecha. My hands that did not have compassion on your hands, yitgadlu, should be cut off. Raglai shelo chasu raglecha. My legs that did not have compassion on your legs, yitkatu, should be cut off. V'lo nitkara da'ati, and I still did not feel calmed until I said, Ko gufi yehi malei shechin, that my whole body be filled with boils. So Amulo, they said to him, Oy lanu sharinucha b'kach. Woe to us that we've seen you in such a state, so completely, disfigured. Amalahem, he said to them, no, Oy liim lo ri'ituni b'kach. Woe to me if you had not seen me like this, because then I would not have been properly punished for what I did wrong. So I have to tell you, I don't understand this story. I mean, what did he do wrong? He had to get his food out of the package. Like his stuff was in the package. Are we supposed to assume that he had food more readily available, like his lunch? I could have given him my lunch. I wanted to give him some of the other food, not the food I was in the middle of eating. I mean, if that's true, it doesn't say it here. Was he a little bit slow in undoing the package? Right, maybe that. Well, but even if that's part of the critique, that you should have been able to see how he was starving to death. Like, what are you supposed to do if your stuff's all in your luggage? So you have to assume other things, like he had more readily available food. So number one, it's not so clear what he did wrong. Number two, his reaction seems like way over the top, and and also like in a way that I think on the one hand, like learning Masechet Taanit, it's worth thinking about the idea of self punishing the body as a way of atoning. Now, in our Masechet, as I've been trying to point out, the theme of atonement has not really been there. Been very. I would say there was one place where it came up, but has not dominated at all. But nevertheless, for some people, that's like the idea of fasting on Yom Kippur. You hurt your body, and that somewhat atones. You're slapping yourself, and that somehow you've punished yourself, and that atones for your sin. But okay, so that is an idea that is around, but to this degree, and it's very hard. Like it does seem like he is blaming himself for something that might not have been his fault. Number one, and number two, he is so racked with guilt on the extreme to which he's taking it out. I have a very hard time relating to this as something to learn from, other than learn from as a counter example. But I don't think that's what the Gemara is intending. Yes.
I think you're right.
Yes.
Nonetheless, what about the word thing?
Oh wait, interesting. So what could he have said?
Yes.
Oh yes. That's interesting. He just started by saying yes, rather than wait a minute. Because wait is like a pushing off rather than a pulling in.
And I think actually you can go back and you read it in contrast to what we just said before about where Rav Huna's interventions. Rav Huna actually, I think, are stories about the limitations on intervention in the market economy.
Mm-hmm.
And except when you have a situation where it's a medicine or over summers, where there's a dire need.
Right.
In which case he makes the medicine available.
And he was being proactive.
Here, this guy is traveling with a lot of food.
Right.
Right? And he says, wait a minute,
Right.
let me see what I can do for you. As opposed to saying, yes, let me help you.
That's a nice point. Very good point.
It's a stretch.
It's emphasized that.
Yeah, but it's a good point. It's a good point. Look, I think that we could say there was something you could have done better, or maybe you should have expected. You're traveling with all this food. There are poor people around. Maybe you should have had food readily available when, for poor people come to you. Okay, so I think there could be, obviously, you could find some area, and I think it's a very excellent point that he could have said yes rather than wait. But it still seems way over the top,
The point is not about poor people. The point is about people in dire straits and starvation, about extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
Because I think these stories really are a critique of international aid. We're not supposed to displace and simply go feed hungry. We're supposed to. That's the.
Interesting. But I do think you're right in terms of like the person that was going out with the gold chair, and he was going out and proactively looking what he could do. Here you're traveling, you're being sort of very absorbed in your personal world. You're going to your father-in-law. You're not sort of thinking about your sense in terms of you're laden with food. Why aren't you going out and also thinking, hey, maybe I'll use the opportunity to distribute some food to people that I see along the way. So again, if you wanted to reach some type of a contrast, but no, I understand that issue. I don't see the Gemara necessarily emphasizing that point about the, but in terms of like what he could have been doing a little bit different, he could have been going out not absorbed in his personal world. He could have been going out like the other rabbi who went out to look what he could do in the community, like in the society. Maybe there's some of that element there.
Does kind of emphasize that if you look closely. The encounter was on the way. It says twice I was on the way, and the person encountered me on the way. And maybe he's saying, wait until I unload the donkey, meaning, like, not here, come see me in the office. When I get there.
Wait until I unload it when I get to my final destination.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense where therefore that's the real problem. Oh, okay. That's very interesting. I didn't read it that way, but if you read it that way, then you really do understand why he's feeling very guilty. Like if he said, wait until I get to my destination and unpack my bags, that's a big deal.
I give out my
exactly. Come see me in the office, right? That's very nice to read. Jonathan, I think I skipped you before. You wanted to say, all right. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Okay. So now we get to the stories of Nachum Ish Gamzu. Why was he called Nachum Ish Gamzu? Anything that would happen to him, he would say, even this is for the best, which is interesting, again, just holding that up to the previous story. Let's take a look at what the story is. One time, the Jewish people wanted to send a gift to the Caesar's house. Amru, man Yeziel, who should go for us? Yeziel Nachum Ish Gamzu, let Nachum Ish Gamzu who go. The Melumen Benisin, he is accustomed to having miracles occur to him. Now, by the way, one miracle that did occur to him, you'll notice, is that his prayers of what should happen to his body were fulfilled. We never exactly find out how that happened, because he did not presumably cut off his own arms. So, we're also talking about other people, right? Choni Amdagel, other people who God listens to their prayers. So, all right, for better or worse. Anyway, presumably they knew that this was, I don't know if this is before or after this terrible state had happened to him, but anyway, presumably they knew that miracles would happen to him. They sent in his hands a full crate of precious jewels and stones. Also, he went and he slept in a certain lodging at night. Bahudira. At night, the other inhabitants got up and they took everything that was in his box. And they put instead of it dirt. Kimata Hasam, when he got to the Caesar's house, Sharinu Lisifta, they opened up the crate, the box. Chaznu de Malu Hafra, they saw it was filled with dust. Bo Malka Lemiktalinu, the king wanted to kill Nachum Ish Gamzu and the whole retinue. The Kulu, Amar Kamachaycha b'Yudai, the Jews are mocking me. Amar, he said, Gamzu Latova, this will be for the best. Asa Eliyahu, so Eliyahu Hanavi came. Once maybe Eliyahu was waiting to see how Nachum would handle it, but now that he saw that Nachum had like a faith that it would all work out for the best, Eliyahu came. And he appeared like one of them. Rashi says the them means one of the Caesar's, retinue. And Amarle, and he said, because here you hear their father, right? Maybe this is the dust from Avraham, their forefather, who when he would throw dust, it would turn to swords. And Gili, when he would throw straw, it would turn to arrows. The sieve, Yitain Kafar Charbo, Kashmi Daf Kashto. Pasuk in Yeshayahu that this, Mizeh Ir Mi Mizrach, who is it that was bestirred from the east, right? So it's understood to be referring to Avraham. Let the dust be, his dust is his swords, and the straw is his bow. So maybe this is the magical dust of Avram Avinu, the dirt of Avram Avinu that turns into swords. So there was a certain country that they had not yet been able to conquer. But Kumine, so they tested out this dirt against this country. They threw dirt, I guess, over the walls, and they weren't able to subdue it because it all turned into swords and it killed them all. So anyway, it was magic dirt, and it helped, and it was helped them conquer this country. So they took Nachumish Gamzu and his retinue into their treasure houses. And they filled his crate with all precious jewels. The same thing that he had come to give them, they now gave him. And they sent him out with great honor. By the way, it's interesting the mention of Avraham, right? Goes down and gets sent out with all of this wealth, right? Avram goes down to Mitzrayim, gets sent out. Again, I don't know if that's intentional, but there's obviously some parallels there. Anyway, and Avram, when it says Avram came back, he says he came back and he dwelled in the places that he dwelled on his way down. Anyway, okay, when he came back, he went and he slept back in the same lodging. They said to him, what did you bring to the Caesar? They knew what he brought. They filled it with dirt. But what is it that you brought to the Caesar that he gave you such honor? He said to them, whatever I took out in my box here when I left in the morning, that's what I brought there. So they figured that the dirt of their, inn was so precious to the Caesar, they knocked down their entire inn and filled up bags of dirt. And they brought it to the Caesar's house. And that dirt that Nachumish Gamzu brought to you, that was our dirt. Okay, but so they tested the dirt that these guys had brought, and it wasn't magical. So they all got killed. Okay. So it was all for the best. They all got killed, and it all worked out for the best. Okay. Anyway, again, don't exactly know what to make of the story other than the lesson of Gamzu L'Tova. But I do also want to say about the Gamzu L'Tova idea that there could be a downside of it. It's great to have faith for yourself that it'll all work out for the best, but it could also lead for lack of taking responsibility about what actually is happening in practice. Like I sometimes talk about that in contrast to like the Yosef and Yehuda. Yosef is the one that says God will work it out. God works it out for the best and whatever, and Yehuda is the one that steps forward and takes responsibility. So if there is meant some contrast with Nachum here going and taking his laden donkeys to his father-in-law's house, as opposed to whoever it was back here, Rav Huna, that would go out and take responsibility for what's going on in the community. If your attitude is everything God does, it'll all work out for the best, that could lead to, okay, there are poor people around, there's sickness around, there's bad things, but it's all going to be for the best, right? It could lead to a real detachment from responsibility to what's happening. So, his jewels. What? He didn't guard his jewels, right? He didn't take certain steps. So all these stories are very nice in taking the message that bad things that happen, you should have bitachon, you should have faith. But to have that as your entire approach, right, can lead to A, not taking responsibility for yourself, and B, not taking full, let's say, responsibility for the larger world. Look, maybe that's part of the story about the ani. Maybe he didn't feel enough of a sense of responsibility. If you have just a sense that everything God is part of God's plan, maybe you're not taking enough responsibility yourself. Again, I don't know if the Gemara is intending any of that critique, but that's what I'm putting forward. Okay, let's keep on going. Ezu dever. Now, what is this case of of pestilence that is a reason to fast and for some of the neighboring villages to participate in some way? Ira Motzia Chamesh Miot Ragli, a city that has 500 foot soldiers, whatever that means, and 3 people die over 3 days. If a city has 1,500 foot soldiers to go Kfar Akko, like Akko. It's funny that Akko here, which is a big city apparently, because that's 1,500, but it's called a Kfar, a village. So I don't know about that. Anyway, the Yotzue Mena Tesha Meitim B'Shlosha Yamim, and 9 people die over 3 days, Zechar Zeh, one after the other, Harei Zeh Dever. Then that is pestilence. B'Yom Echad Oba Arba Yamim Ein Zeh Dever. If it's all in one day, you might think it's worse, but maybe it's just some, not a persistent thing, and it's just a freak chance. And if it's over 4 days, then maybe it's not severe enough, and that is not considered pestilence. Now, what's interesting is that the Gemara, the Gemara did the math right, meaning the Gemara, you could have said, if it's for 500 people, it's 3 people over 3 days. So for 1,500 people, somebody could have said, it's wrong. Well, it's 9 people over 9 days. But no, because that's exact same as 3 people over 3 days. So maybe it's not such a chiddush, but people have been known to make that mistake. So the point is, it's still 9 people, 3 people a day over 3 days. Okay. Now, a city that only has 500 people, same point. 3 people over 3 days, that is dever. B'yom echad, in 1 day, oba arba'a yamim, or in 4 days, ein zeh dever. It's not. Again, even though it's all compressed, it's not dever because it's not as necessarily persistent. Drokeret, Ira Motzia Chamesh Meos Ragli Have. So Drokeret was a city that had 500, again, soldiers. I don't know if it literally means soldiers or 500, able-bodied men, whatever it means. The Yatsumi Men Sholish Meisim Yom Echad, and 3 deaths occurred all in 1 day. Gazer Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda Tanisa. Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda thought that this was dever, and he made a fast day. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said to him, "Come on, to Reb Meir, who are you going like that? You say 3 in 1 day is the same as 3 in 3 days." That's like Rabbi Meir, the Amar, who says by a case of a goring ox, what makes an ox considered to be a muad, habitual gorer. So the general rule is he gored 1 person a day over 3 days, so 3 people over 3 days. What if he gored 3 people in 1 day? So the first opinion is he's not a habitual gorer. Maybe today he got crazy, but he's not an habitual gorer. To which Rabbi Meir says, the Amar if when he spreads out the goring, you're liable for full because he's habitual. So if he compresses them, how much more so is he a more violent or dangerous ox? But again, it might be more intense, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's more persistent or habitual. So that was Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda's approach, and he felt that 3 in 1 day is actually worse than 3 in 3 days, and made a tanis. Now that we had Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak saying, sort of pushing back on Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda, we're going to have 1 or 2 stories about that. Rav Nachman, Amalei Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda said to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Leikamar Leisi Gaman, you should move here, move to our place. Apparently his place, Rav Nachman Bar Rav Chizda, was a more place of Torah. And what are you doing in that small little village there? Nobody, they don't really know Torah there. Come move to us, to our place. Amalei, he said to him, Tanina, no, I teach a Braita. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Lo Mekomo Shel Adam Mechabdo, El Adam Mechabed et Mekomo. A person's place doesn't give him honor. The person gives honor to his place. Shekain Matzinu B'Har Sinai. We found in Har Sinai, Shekozman Shechina Shruya Alav, as long as the divine presence was on Har Sinai. Amrat Torah, Gamaton V'Bakar, Yeru, Muharu. The animals couldn't graze. Nistalka Shechina Mimena, when the Shechina was lifted up from it. Amrat Torah, B'Mshal Chayavel, Hem Yalu B'Har. Then the mountain lost any significance, and people could go up. So it wasn't that the mountain was what was important; it was God's presence that was important. Similar in the tenth of meaning. Shekozman Shuna Toy Amrat Torah, while it was spread, the Torah says, and God's presence was there. Let all of the, or maybe it means the place that the Oel Moed was. The Oel Moed gave significance to the place, and all Tamei people had to be sent away. Once the curtains were rolled up and the Oel Moed was dismantled, that actual geographic, space was not itself significant. Then all the Tamei people could enter into the space. So, thank you very much. I'm happy here. My presence gives honor to the place. I don't need a place to give honor to me. Amalei, so he said to me, so you know what? if that's true, I should move over to you to where you are, which is a little funny because I don't understand. It's like, what's the joke? The person who heard that most accidents occur within 5 miles of home, so he moved. So he says, oh, well, if your presence honors the place, I should move you. Well, what about your presence is honoring your place? But maybe he felt that, he was the more honorable person. Like he was at the high, the person of greater status. So he says, all right, if that's true, and maybe he just wanted the company. So he said, if that's true, if you're not moving to me, I should move to you. So he said, okay, Amrle, he said to him, no. Mutav yavo mana ben prasi to mana ben mana. It's appropriate for you. Your initial request was more appropriate because you were asking $100, or the son of $50, should come to a mana, to 100, the son of 100. Val yavo mana ben mana, it's a mana ben pras. But 100, the son of 100, shouldn't come to 100, the son of 50, or a full, the son of a half. What does it mean? Because one was of Nachman bar Rav Chisda. So Rav Nachman's father was a Rav, whereas it was Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, the one who is the one in the place that's saying, I'm not going to move, a person honors his place. His father wasn't a Rav. So he said, no, you shouldn't come to me. You are from a more chush of a heritage. You shouldn't be moving your place towards my place, which one does wonder, a little bit, like, it seems a little bit that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was the more chashuv one, and he was it's a little interesting exactly what this dynamic is. Whether he really held that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak bar Rav Chisda was more chashuv in himself, or he just think his chashivas came from his father. So, but don't you move to me? Okay, Surah have okay. So that was the end of that story. Let's just I guess read one more story. Surah have dvarta b'shivusei derav. In Surah there was dever, pestilence in the neighborhood of there was pestilence in Surah. B'shivusei derav lo havas, but it didn't afflict Rav's little neighborhood. Lo havis devarta. It didn't come into Rav's neighborhood. Savru mina, the people thought that mishum zechusei derav, that it was Rav's merit that saved them. The nafish that was so great that it saved them. Again, sort of like the merit of saving from the falling wall. Here, the merit of a great rabbi, of a great man, saves from the dever. But now look, here again is like a pushback on some of those earlier stories. So Itchazilu Bechelma, the people who were saying this, a dream came to them, and they saw in a dream that the following message. Rav did nafisha zechusa tuva. Rav did nafisha zechusa tuva. Rav did nafisha zechusa tuva. Rav has much merit. This matter is too minor for it to be based on Rav's zechus. Rav's zechus is so great, this doesn't need Rav's zechus to save. I mean, I don't know, dever seems to be a pretty big thing. This all came on the merit of a certain person, an unnamed person, that would lend out mara vizavila, like a shovel and some other digging instrument, likvura, to help people for burial. So because of his merit that he would help people for burial, when something came that would kill people, his merit of helping people at moments of death was enough to save that neighborhood. The small, like anonymous, the small deeds of anonymous people. And let's just read one more story just like that. Bidrokeret, which we heard about before, Havei Delecta, a fire broke out. B'shivusa de Rav Huna lo Havei Delecta, and it didn't break out in Rav Huna's neighborhood. Savramina b'schusa de Rav Huna de Nafish. It's because of Rav Huna's merit, which is so great. They saw in a dream, this would be too small of a deal for Rav Huna, for Rav Huna's merit. You don't need Rav Huna's merits for this. A certain woman, that when she would heat up her oven, fire up her oven, she'd let her neighbors use her oven that had already been heated up, and the fuel had already been used, and it was already hot. Come and use my oven, or else it's going to waste. Why waste your own fuel? So that was enough to save it. So again, I think that this is like a beautiful counterpoint. We're not denying the idea that great rabbis have great merits and that will save them from great things, but in a way, all we heard about before was it saved them from falling buildings. Here, if you ask me, stopping a fire and stopping pestilence is at least as big of a deal, although the Gemara is making it more minor, and I think there's a real power with ending about the story that like the small little good deeds of anonymous people, can have a tremendous type of a saving effect. Okay, so we'll end with that, yes.
Do you think that there's a relationship between the good news being excited and the bad event that's being averted?